Welcome back to the YouTube, guys. Today's episode, I'm going to be covering female PEDs, exactly what they are, when they're used, if you should consider using them, and some side effects and risks to be aware of, as especially nowadays, there's so much misinformation, misuse, and just overall a lack of understanding of what these performance enhancing drugs are, how they work, and if you should even consider using them as part of your bodybuilding journey. So firstly, what are female PEDs? Female PEDs are female performance enhancing drugs. Now, the spectrum of drugs in this category are quite vast. You have two main types of assistance that you will look to use in bodybuilding for both male and female. You have what's called androgenic assistance and non-androgenic assistance. Androgenic assistance is anything that alters your hormone panel to assist with higher levels of hormones above what you naturally produce. Then on the flip side, you also have non-androgenic assistance, which isn't something which directly alters hormones which could develop male characteristics. So when we look to put all of this into a category of female PEDs, there's certainly no safe way to use them, but there's definitely safer options to use when it comes to going down this route, if that's something that you want to be a part of your bodybuilding journey. So what do these performance enhancing drugs do? They essentially complement everything that we look to utilize as bodybuilders to further performance, further recovery, and ultimately further muscle growth. In contest prep or diet scenarios, they can be used to enhance the rate of fat loss, keep you anti-catabolic, so meaning that you don't lose any muscle mass in that process. And what you can essentially do using performance enhancing drugs is, if there is any downregulation of either hormones, the speed of fat loss, you can alter that by replacing what your body would normally replace or go higher to bring about faster or more enhanced results. How do they work? PEDs essentially raise or replace what it is you naturally produce. So again, there's two types of performance enhancing drugs. You can typically have a performance enhancing drug that replaces what you produce naturally if you stop producing that certain amount, or you can go above that and beyond it, which is then when we go into the real enhanced range of pushing you beyond what your natural limits would be. Now, there's so much discussion out there of should you use PEDs, shouldn't you use PEDs? In this video, I'm going to try and give you a very honest and realistic insight to what my opinion is from working with a number of females across multiple different categories, and also what I feel like should be considered when or if looking to make this decision. Now, firstly, when you're looking to use, or if you're looking to use performance enhancing drugs, in my opinion, if you're looking to go down the route of using PEDs, it should only be considered if there's an extreme competitive goal. Taking performance enhancing drugs at a super physiological level should only be considered, again, if you're looking to go down that route of really dedicating and committing your life to this, because 9 times out of 10, when using these hormones or using these compounds, you're essentially changing and altering the way that your body functions. And this 9 times out of 10 is an irreversible process. So it's something that really needs to be considered in terms of, how far do I want to take this? Is this something which I'm willing to accept the risks of short and long term? And is it something which is complementing what I'm already doing? PED shouldn't be something you just look to use as a one-off, or I'm going to try it. It should be something which is almost a lifestyle commitment, as again, you are altering the way that your body functions internally to, again, assist what we do with bodybuilding. Now, I wouldn't say there's necessarily a tick box of things you should have in place before you look to go down this route, but I definitely think there's merit in having everything you do as a bodybuilder on lock before even considering this. If you're not maximizing your progress from a training standpoint, a nutrition standpoint, even a routine and sleep standpoint, you really have no place using these compounds, because you've still got areas you can improve on within your current setup. So that's something to definitely be considered, is either reaching out to a coach or really being honest with yourself before looking to utilize these PEDs and saying, am I doing absolutely everything possible to make progress? And second, have I paid enough time to this process in general before looking to go down this route? Have I really maximized my potential? And have I really pushed my body and mind to its fullest capability before looking to go down this next stage? Now, to give you a very practical example, a conversation that I had with a client not that long ago was a very honest and open conversation in regards to the progress that they'd made competitively over the previous 3 years and the goals that they wanted to achieve. This is, again, a conversation that should be had between you and a professional in really deciding, is this route something that you're willing to commit your lifestyle to? And again, considering all variables in terms of your genetic potential, how far you want to take this, and again, are you willing to accept the potential risks and side effects that come from it? Utilizing or going down this route of PEDs shouldn't be something which is just thrown upon you, or it's just something that you mindlessly think about. It should genuinely be a very thought through process and conversation to make sure it's something that you want to commit your whole life to. As I said at the start, this is something that will change the trajectory of your life, utilizing these PEDs in the way that you will act and be moving forward. So it's something that really needs to be considered in terms of that risk to reward ratio. So this is why when deciding or looking into this decision, it's not something that should be taken in comparison to your boyfriend's cycle or something that you've seen online. The way that PEDs work with males is completely different to the way that PEDs work with females. This amount or certain compounds should not be in a female body. Therefore, using these PEDs, you will over time develop or can develop male characteristics taking these hormones. So again, it's something that needs to be considered on any level, whether that's your first cycle, a 4-week cycle. The minute that you take your first amount of PEDs from an androgenic side, you could be at risk of side effects. So again, it's something that needs to be considered and spoken through with a professional, someone with a grand experience in this realm, and also somebody that's potentially done it that you know of or you're good friends with, that you can trust their judgment and opinion. Side effects and health risks. From the moment that you go down this route, you need to be fully understanding of the potential risks and side effects from taking these PEDs. Now, when it comes to side effects, there's 2 categories that this falls within. The first one's going to be within your actual blood work related to health. Now, taking any exogenous amounts of PEDs or hormones, you're going to see potential skews within kidney, liver, or lipids, meaning your cholesterol. So this is something that needs to be considered when looking to take these PEDs in your supplement stack, what it is you're utilizing in terms of cardio, forms of heart health, to make sure that if you are utilizing any orals, something along the lines of Anavar, you are in a position to be able to offset those side effects to the best of your ability in keeping your health fully in check. And this is something that I heavily advise, is that you get blood work done before, during, and after to see exactly how those PEDs have functioned and been internalized by your body. Now, other side effects which are slightly more concerning, as I said, you're essentially putting a male hormone into your body. What that's going to do over a short and long period of time is develop male characteristics, facial hair, deepening of your voice. These are irreversible side effects, not necessarily hair. The voice side is irreversible side effects that you cannot get rid of or you cannot undo. And this isn't something which happens after a certain time frame, a certain dose. It can happen at any point. It's something which, yes, the longer that you use, the more at risk you are. But still, from the first time that you take that, there are unfortunate scenarios and examples where you will do a first cycle and you will virilize from that first cycle. So it is something that needs to be considered in, are you willing to accept that risk in relation to your goals and what you want to achieve? Now, we're looking to go down this route. It needs to be considered in line with your category and what the category criteria is. Obviously, as we go through the tiers of categories, getting more and more muscular, more and more conditioned for categories like women's physique and bodybuilding, the range and amounts of PEDs do differ. So again, if you are looking to start your first cycle, let's say as an amateur bikini athlete, that's going to be a very different cycle to, let's say, a pro women's physique cycle. So again, there's different categories that you fall in when doing this. This is why, again, it's so essential that you approach a professional that's worked with either different categories or specialize in that one specific category. So there's a rough idea of what's used in relation to that overall competitive look. Now, when we actually break down category criteria, instead of going into specifics with what's actually used, let's look at everything from a bikini level all the way up into a women's bodybuilding level. The difference in muscularity and condition is vastly different. Therefore, what it is you should select as part of your PED stack is going to be very, very different. And this is why, again, it's so essential that you have knowledge and you have understanding of not just how these work, but also the amounts in practical use, so you do have an understanding. What I'm going to do is upload a slide of something to be aware of when it comes to rough guidelines and timelines. Now, I've underplayed this slightly, but that's always the best way to go, in the sense of I want to be able to give you a resource to take away from this, to look and compare to if you are given a cycle, suggested a cycle, in relation to what's used on the highest level. If you're way above this, reconsider it and make sure that you look into that fully, or even ask the coach before considering this, as this is a real basic blueprint of what's used on the highest levels. So examples in terms of specific categories. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion For a fit model, there should be no assistance or no PED use needed. It's a division that requires minimal levels of muscularity and a reasonably decent level of condition. So therefore, in my opinion, no PED should be utilized. Bikini, on an amateur level, I definitely think there's use for non-androgenic PED assistance in regards to Clen, other fat burners, potentially HGH, which kind of falls in the peptide category, but there's definitely some use of that on an amateur level. On a pro level, there's definitely scenarios where androgenic assistance will be used, but again, it's very minimal. And specifically for bikini, if you've been training for a significant period of time and you're really pushing or breaching past the point of either very good conditioning or slightly higher levels of muscularity, this is something that needs to be considered in, do you need to use PEDs? Sometimes that overly hard, overly conditioned look isn't actually favored. So you may actually be putting yourself at a lower placing from actually using performance enhancing drugs, which in that case doesn't really do what you assume it to do. So again, all this needs to be considered. On a wellness level, I definitely think there can be use for non-androgenic and androgenic assistance, especially in amateur and pro levels. There is assistance used in those leagues, especially where there's slightly higher levels of muscle and the conditioning requirements are on par with bikini. So you want to make sure that you're able to retain that muscle mass in the lower body. So the more that you go into the higher, more muscular categories, the need and requirement for more muscle sometimes comes with the use of anabolic assistance to hold on to that muscle tissue whilst getting to those extreme levels of condition. On a women's physique and a women's bodybuilding level, there is always 9 times out of 10 PED or assistance use. Again, not necessarily high amounts, but there's definitely need for that in those categories based on the overall levels of muscularity required is 99% of the time is beyond what's achievable naturally. Now, again, there's rare scenarios in all of this. I'm not talking in absolutes. There's definitely some genetic freaks out there that can compete in these categories without, but for the majority of people on those levels, some level of assistance will be or may need to be required. On a figure level, again, same as the wellness. I'd kind of put figure and wellness in the same category when it comes to PED use, maybe slightly different compounds, but in terms of the timeframes used, the actual compound selection would probably be very similar on an amateur and a pro level for figure and wellness. So to give you some examples of what I mean by androgenic and non-androgenic assistance, again, these are typically going to fall within 2 different categories. Now, both of these cannot be used in natural federations or federations which don't condone the use of PEDs. Regardless of whether it's non-androgenic, it's still a performance enhancing drug, and these are banned to be used in natural shows. So to give you an example, as you've probably heard some of these names and compounds thrown around, an example of non-androgenic assistance will be anything along the lines of human growth hormone, clenbuterol, insulin, metformin. Anything within those categories falls within the non-androgenic compounds. The more androgenic compounds is going to be anything from Anavar to Winstrol to Primobolan to Masteron to NPP. Anything along those lines is going to fall within the androgenic compound selection. So that's just a little example there in case you've heard these terms thrown around. Now, lastly, I've got on here some other points to be considered if you are looking to go down this route. As I mentioned briefly earlier, blood work. Blood work is essential. It's going to tell you what you can't see. So getting blood work done before you even look to go down or even think about being assistance is essential, so you can see where your baseline level of hormones are. If you decide to go on or use assistance, you then have a reference point to work back to in terms of what you're looking to get yourself into ranges when it comes to where you was previous to using assistance. That's extremely important. Now, you may not ever be able to achieve those same levels, but to get as close to them as possible is your goal when coming off of performance enhancing drugs from a health standpoint and also from a hormonal standpoint as well. Bloods during. Again, when you're altering hormones, you are going to be changing how you look based on your ratios of hormones. So making sure that when you are taking these compounds, you are budgeting for blood work to be done during and after to make sure exactly where these compounds are putting you on that reference point to almost optimize them in your favor towards that category look or towards the look that you're trying to bring within your physique. Next is going to be making elaborate notes on everything you've taken, from the dosages to the time frames, and notes on how you felt on these specific compounds as well. This is something that I will heavily get my girls to do in relation to when they're working with me, to if they go to another coach. I want them to have as much information possible on what they've taken for the duration, for the dose. Although I know this as a coach, if 2-3 years down the line they join another coach, you want to have that information available for somebody else to consider when or if planning your next cycle. That's so important. There's definitely been scenarios where girls have come to me not knowing how long they've taken what compound for, how they felt whilst using it. And it's really unhelpful in those scenarios to plan out future cycles, as you don't know what potential damage has been done in the past based on what's been recommended at that time. So making notes, being very elaborate with how you felt on specific compounds and the time frame and dose that you use them is absolutely essential. Next, this one's slightly harder to do, but it is something that I advise you to budget for if you are looking to go down this route, especially with androgenic compounds. Getting your assistants tested. This is so essential. There's a lot of compounds or a lot of companies that will use different compounds and label them as something else. As a female, this is your worst nightmare. If you're going to be taking something which is deemed as primobolan and it's actually testosterone, you are at a very, very high risk of viralization. It is not worth it for the sake of 100 to 150 pounds to get that tested. Or find a coach that is trusted and has contacts available that you know are genuinely what they say they are. Something that I will do with my girls is I will get batches sent off and tested to make sure that what they're taking is legitimate. As we're working together, that is also part of my reputation. So that's something that I take very seriously when or if looking to recommend PEDs to females. Some other bits on the side. If you've taken Clen in the diet phase, Anavar in the diet phase before, can you still compete naturally? Recently, there's been rules brought out which state after a certain period of time, I'm not going to state specifics, but after that period of time, you can still compete naturally, having taken these compounds in the past. There needs to be a significant period of time paid to almost class you to be able to do natural shows. Now, is that ethically right? Again, you can argue both sides, but you can if you've either been misled information, taken something without knowing or without researching, and you've only used something for a short period of time, there is going to be a place that you can almost have a chance to rectify that, given that you pay enough time being natural. So ultimately, as a summary, guys, it's not a decision that anybody else can make for you. Like everything in life, this is something you have to weigh up the risks to rewards to assess, is this something that complements your current and future lifestyle? And is it something that you're willing to accept the risks of short and long term? If the answer is yes, take pride in it. Something which I see a lot of females do is almost become a little bit scared to either say they're using assistance or even tell it to future coaches or people that they're, or even relationships that they're in, is mentioned that they're using PEDs. If you've decided to go down that route, own it and be proud of it. Like, you're part of a very, very, very small percentage of people that are willing to sacrifice those side effects in relation to your goals and what you want to achieve. So if that is something that you decide to do, own it and be proud of it. Apart from that, guys, I believe that is it for the video. If anybody's got any questions, anything specific that they want to dive into, please feel free to DM me on Instagram for my opinion in regards to those questions or subjects. Like, comment, subscribe, and catch you on the next one.